Hello, good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. In the Hot Seat today we have a senior banker, former trade unionist, Mr. Rusari Pala Tenakon. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Faraz.
What did you do when Dr. N.M. Pereira went home? What was your role in that?
Well, it was a very controversial role, I should say. Something very, very controversial because we were taking the leadership of a struggle launched by an important trade union in the country, which was not properly dealt with by the Honourable Minister at that time. So we had to retaliate in some form.
And what did you do? What did you do? Did you pelt him with stones or?
No, not that. So, I mean, it was a very, very gentlemanly trade unionism that we resorted to.
Right.
But that was good enough to create an opinion, starting from the spreading to the entire working class at that time. And well, the final thing was that we saw his departure unsung.
Educated at the LSE, and you sent him home.
Well, I don't say that I did it, but anyway, this is how
it panned.
How it happened.
How possible is that in the context of today's politics?
I don't think, but whatever it is, whatever is said and done, there was a high degree and quality of democracy prevailing at that time.
But between then and now, we've had white vans.
We have to try it out and see. And we haven't seen such struggles in these regimes in the recent past in this country now, unfortunately.
So do you think there's an erosion in democratic values?
There is, definitely. We were out for 108 days out on strike. The entire industry was paralyzed, closed.
The banking industry?
Banking industry. Still, we survived it. In the end of it, we went back to work. We started work in the normal way.
You weren't kidnapped?
No, no such thing. No such. Of course, there were some veiled threats. Those were tolerated in that same spirit.
I see.
Yes.
Right. Let's ask you something more current and more topical. What do you think of this budget, the first budget presented by this so-called national government?
For us to start with, can I have the permission to differ with you when you call it the national government? Because
I am not calling it that. That's our dear Prime Minister's calling it.
I don't know. I don't feel like calling it a national government because we don't see the qualities that is expected of a national government in this government somehow. Because in the national government we expect a broader concept of understanding, agreement, consensus, which is far from the situation what we see today. I mean, do you see any type of consensus except among those who are in the government or within that realm of the identified group calling themselves the government? Only in that, because that entire consensus that is expected of a parliament to be called a national government, which most importantly emanate at times of crisis, on a national need, on a national requirement. So there is a wider understanding and agreement of minds in a situation like that. But we don't see that here.
So what of the budget? Good, bad, mediocre?
Well, you have put it very, very short. I wish I could answer by using...
You have many more options?
using one word. If I can answer that, I think I would be the happiest, but it is not so.
So it's neither good, nor it's bad, nor is it mediocre?
No. I think
is it encouraging?
The proper sort of wording or proper explanation for the budget is, it is a budget full of expectations.
Yeah.
We are all expecting something to happen in a very bad situation. But the situation is gloomy, I must say. Everyone has to admit that. A grim situation. We have to definitely, the whole country, look forward to a very grim situation in the country. But The budget, I think, with a word of appreciation to the finance minister, with all his restrictions, with all his reservations, well, he has spelled out a policy, some kind of a vision. I don't say it as a very long vision or long view vision, but some, at least for a short time, he has spelled out what could be spelled out in a situation like this. So to that extent, we have to appreciate his efforts in this budget. But the situation for us, I must say, it's not that rosy as people expect it to be.
Isn't it true that the finance minister is operating with one arm tied to his back?
I think he's seriously handicapped. I think he is very seriously handicapped, and this is the view that is shared by very many in the financial circles, in the political circles as well, because what we see today is for the first time breaking away from the traditional experiences that we have since independence in this country, in the parliament. You know, in the ministry portfolio, this is the first time that we see a finance minister sons state banks. And finance minister, I don't know whether he has a control without any sort of apparently direct control over the central bank, which is a must. You know, this combination of banking into the finance ministry is not something very foreign. We are all used to it. They are so inherently, cogently connected.
Is it a bit like when Mrs. Kumaratunga appointed Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister and then proceeded not to give him temple trees?
Well, there are so many precedences like that. So many things have happened. I think you can, that analogy is not bad.
It's not bad, is it?
Yes, I think.
Because here, you know, he gives him a pretty senior position, but he then almost pulls the glory away by not listing the state banks under him, the central bank, and so we have another minister in charge of, state public enterprise.
Yes.
So isn't it a bit like really one hand behind the back?
It is. It is. I think it makes the worst scenario is that not that he is deprived or denied of the full stretch of the portfolio that he should be given. But what is important is that there is so much of cohesion that is required in the area of the financial area, where as a minister he has to have his control on, which makes it difficult for him in a situation like this.
We'll take a break there and come back to discuss the budget and more very shortly. Welcome back to the hot seat with Mr. Rusaripala Tenakun, former chairman of the Bank of Ceylon, trade unionist, and in charge of the State Bankers Pensioners Association. Isn't that right, Mr. Rusaripala?
Yes, you are.
And so what do you make out of this budget then? What about some specifics?
Oh, as I said at the beginning, people in the country are having expectations, and that's all they can have. There's nothing to revolt against, or there's nothing to rise against, but they have to live in expectation, taking into account the situation of the economy. Well, the circumstances under which this budget comes into light today have to be taken note of very seriously by everybody, because you know, we have the economic indicators are very important. After all, a budget is it is the income and the expenditure balancing, and when you have a deficit, how to balance that deficit. So this is, in essence, this is what it is. So in the income and expenditure balancing, one has to sort of propagate the thinking of the country and the direction of the country, in which direction it goes, basically taking into account how it affects the economy of the country. So here is a situation where we have a total revenue expectation of about 2047 billion, whereas the total expenditure that is predicted and that is that has to be borne, is in the region of about 2,787 billions. This is one of the highest ever records that we have in the budgeting history of this country. So that leaves us with a deficit of 740 billion.
And how does one bridge that then?
This is the thing. This is the exercise that the finance minister is heavily saddled with, burdened with, I should say, because he has spelled out in this budget. The bridging takes place this way. I think from foreign sources, it's about 183 billion. And from domestic sources, he plans to bring in 557 billion.
Right.
Now, this means a lot when you say foreign. Now, this 183 million is only required to bridge the gap, the existing gap that is created between the income and the expenditure that is projected for the coming year. But over and above this, there is another element that we have to take note of, that is the debt servicing. The debt servicing requirement is in the region of 336 billion. That is not included in the deficit.
Right.
That's not included in the deficit.
Oh, I see.
So which means, in addition to the 183 billion that he wishes to bridge from foreign sources, he will have to look for a total income in foreign support or input 519 billion. 519 billion.
A seemingly insurmountable task, or?
Very much. It all depends. So many things on so many factors. But let me tell you, now out of this 519 billion, he expects to get 309 from commercial sources.
Right.
He spells it out in the annexure to the budget speech. And also 210 billion from international sources. Now, the success of this story, of this bridging, depends very heavily on of course he can plan. He has planned and he has, of course, earmarked certain ways in which he is going to bridge this. But all that depends on the international situation. I don't know, Faras, whether you have heard whether something is in the offing today that the US government, the Federal Reserve, is going to increase the interest rates very shortly, maybe in a day or two. This is what is discussed in the financial circles today.
And will that spell disaster to Sri Lanka then?
There will be very serious repercussions. The repercussions would be, one, the sources to which we look forward to bridge the gap will become little more expensive than what we are projecting today.
Right.
And two, the foreign exchange involvements that we have or we are enjoying right now here as the component of investment coming from foreigners, there is a tendency under the high interest rates offered by the US government, there is a tendency for those investments to go elsewhere.
Yes.
That's another serious threat. So, with this, in this combined situation, in this, and there is another factor. Take the neighboring country, the immediate, our big brother, India. They are offering 6.5% for foreign investments in that country. So if there is a choice in the minds of the investors, those whom we are looking up to bring in foreign exchange into the country, if they do have a choice, well, I leave it to you where they will select or choose to go. India is an important place for them.
I noticed that the central bank has given a dollar bond a rate of 6.85%. So, judging by what you say, that's a pretty good rate.
Yeah, the affordability is the question. You can even offer 7, but the question is affordability. And I think they were made to offer that rate, which is very unprecedentedly high. Because of this situation.
Mr. Sipala, there are many references to the different industries, but I noticed there that the Minister of Finance spoke about the gem and jewelry sector, and he spoke about having regular auctions in Colombo. It was a bit short on detail, obviously,
Yeah.
but what caught my eye was not the gems and the jewelry, but the reference to diamonds. Now, as far as I know, there are no diamonds in Sri Lanka apart from the ones that your girlfriends and wives have. What do you have to say? You're former chairman of the National Gem and Jewelry Authority. What do you have to say about that?
I'm happy that you, as not only as a journalist but as a person who is interested in this industry, has focused your attention on these forthcoming auctions that are to be held in this country.
It was glaring.
Yeah, it's a glaring thing. In fact, it was rather intriguing to me what type of auction that the Minister of Finance has in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is auction for generating income from our own resources,
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows that we don't have any diamonds here.
Okay.
So that means we are going to have an auction of the imported stuff. But
I see. Well, to discuss that and a bit more, we'll take a short break and come right back to the hot seat. Back to the hot seat with Mr. Rusaripala Tennakoon. Mr. Rusaripala, 20% of the population in our country are below the poverty line. That's with less than $2 a day. Is that true?
it is. It is, because we don't have to challenge that situation, because that is acknowledged even by the present government. They say that it is a fact and it is existing. You know, the 20% of the population is a very, very large segment of the population.
Yes.
And if they are below the poverty line, if they are earning below $2 per day,
Yeah.
definitely they are below, from any standards, you know, that they are below the poverty line.
Indeed.
So this is a heavy burden on a country. And in a country where the indirect taxing
Yeah.
by far supersedes the quantum of the direct taxing, you can see the burden that would have gone to this segment of the society, that including this largest below the poverty line segment.
What can we do?
Well, this is a very, very sort of important issue, that, you know, this is where we need a national leadership, a far-sighted national leadership, to give the real value to our resources without depending on foreign exchange, foreign investments alone.
You mean a leadership with a balanced viewpoint?
Of course it should be, because, you know, there are countries that have reached the very high standards in the world in their economic results, generating results for their countries, but that they are backed up. They are having a vast experience base. They are looked up to as national leaders.
In your estimation, is there a strong leader in this country who can formulate policy and take it forward? Maybe somebody on the lines of Lee Kuan Yew.
For us, my personal thinking is that you can look up to somebody as a national leader, but then if it is not proven by his own doings and his own delivery of results, it remains a conjecture, you know, that we are imagining things to happen. So, but we look up to various people, looking at their visionary thinking, looking at their planning, looking at their commitment, but still there is a gap that is required. What is the past?
There is a perception that Ranil Wickremesinghe is the right man for the economy. Is that just a perception, or is there some element of truth in that?
It remains a perception still, because in reality it is yet to be proven, because he hasn't had the spell of his own in this country to prove his mettle. in this direction to prove his thinking. But anyway, there is a belief, a very strong belief, from his commitment, from his statements, from his visionary statements, that people believe that he is a person who can be relied upon to bring back the economy of this country to some acceptable status.
What worries me, and I don't know whether it worries you, but it's always I, and I. We had the governor of the central bank say, I instructed them to take 10 times more than was advertised. And we have the Prime Minister say in Parliament, I asked for these contracts to be stopped. I asked for this investigation. It was I, and I. How much of the we should we have?
We should have more of it, definitely. In a situation like this, there are a lot of compromises that are required to elicit the support of all quarters as one claims to be now. They say a literary system of government where consensus, discussions go on to reach an understanding. Here we find the Lichavis fighting in Parliament.
And overall, though, how would we say this? Ravi Karunayaka, Minister of Finance, in a consensus government, has tried his best. Do you think he'll have the necessary support from the bureaucracy to collect these monies?
This is a very, very important part that he has to depend on, because everything what he spells out depends on the implementation part, and the implementation depends on the bureaucracy. Here we have a bureaucracy. I don't know whether they are committed fully to reach these targets and to meet these targets. So he will have a very uphill task, because a budget is nothing. Today you can spell out anything, but at the end of the year or end of the period, when you assess, if you have not achieved or reached the targets, the budget doesn't mean anything.
And finally, but really, even though it's final, it's not the least of our problems, but I noticed, or I didn't notice, any encouragement to the estate, to the plantation workers, to the plantation sector.
This I observe as a very serious lapse myself. I too agree, because the increasing of productivity is equally important than any other measure that is proposed in this budget to improve the income. The reducing of the wasteful expenditure, improving the efficiency of the government sector, public sector, then the public sector state-owned enterprises to be improved. Equally, the production related to labor is very important. But I don't see any significant weightage that is being given to that sector, because the human factor, the involvement of the human factor, I think my mind goes back to the trade union days, but I always think of this. The importance that one should adduce to the human factor in production is not second to anything else.
What about the fact that the minister says that there will be blending of tea to be allowed in Sri Lanka?
I think he's going to legalize the bad practice. That's what I feel. All these days we were talking bad about blending. So now if his vision is to sort of legalize the blending, well, those who are engaged in that bad practice will have to give it up.
Well, on that note, I'm going to have to say thank you very much for joining us in the hot seat, Mr. Rusiripala, and thank you for being on our network. We look forward to having you yet again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.